Scrutiny panel. Welcome all. I'm going to ask Rachel to start recording as it is 10 o'clock, okay? All right, first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. I have Councillors Matthew Jones and Councillor Michael Locke. Any others? Disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests for members. Oh, Councillor Mike White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Agenda item 7, Revenue Financial Outturn Report 23-24. Appendix A, I'm a member of the Port Authority. It's a personal interest, and I will fill in the form when I come down to planning meeting after and even in the office for the Democratic Services.
Okay, thank you, Mike. At approximately 5 to 11, I have to leave. I've got a doctor's appointment, and Councillor Peter Black has agreed to take over as chair. Okay? Any issues? You can object all you like, but it's happening. Oh, Councillor Mark Tribe.
Good morning, all. Yes, exactly the same reason as Mike. So I'll fill in the necessary form at the completion of this meeting, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Anyone else? Any officers got any issues? No. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the prohibition of whip votes and declarations of party whip, which is standard procedure for all scrutiny panels. Item 4 is the minutes of the previous meeting, agreed minutes of the 11th of June. Any issues on those minutes? No? Okay, thank you. Number 5, item 5 is public questions. I don't think we have any for this particular meeting. So then we move on to item 6 on the agenda, which is the capital outturn and finance to 2023-24. Councillor Stewart, leader, have you got anything to say at the beginning?
Ben first, if that's okay, Chair.
Okay, can I then ask Mr. Ben Smith, Director of Finance, to present the report?
Thank you, Chair. This is the first of 3 that went to Cabinet recently. I can be very brief in terms of my technical advice on the capital outturn report. The report in front of you makes clear that there was approximately £40 million worth of slippage, quite sizable slippage, but not dissimilar to previous years. You should not be surprised. The biggie is we have a heavily borrowed and heavily unsupported borrowing financed capital programme, and effectively all of that £40 million worth of slippage just means I didn't spend cash. It gets rolled over into the following year, and as you have heard from me for over repeated years, makes us millions in terms of temporary treasury investment income, which you'll hear about in the next report. The rest of the report sets out in normal fashion where the large underspends were, predominantly in place, the usual appendices emphasising where the big spend was, and it's concentrated on a relatively small number of schemes, and also where the big underspends were, again also concentrated in a relatively small number of schemes, predominantly city centre and regeneration related. The leader may wish to comment more on that because you normally focus on delivery as much as me rubbing my hands with glee making savings on the revenue account, but I think it is also fair to recognise it's the scale of that programme, the scale of ambition, which is sizable and probably does result in that being the area where there is the largest amount of slippage. I have nothing further to add on this report. I think it's a relatively straightforward report, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Leader?
Yeah, I think it was just that last point I was going to come in on, Chair. Just to remind members, obviously, we still have one of the largest capital programmes anywhere in Wales. It's important that where there is slippage, despite Mr. Smith being quite happy to not spend the cash, that we understand the reasons and the places where slippage have occurred. As Mr. Smith has alluded to, they are known to us. They are ones that are not surprises. They all have specific issues attached to them, which have impacted on the ability to deliver to the timeframe that we'd originally proposed. But again, significant delivery, over £100 million invested this year, despite the slippage that has incurred in year. One of the actions that we'll be taking going forward will be to regularly review the capital profiling of all of the major projects, so that rather than have a big adjustment at the end of the year, we'll be making smaller adjustments or certainly doing some reprofiling in year as we learn about any of the profiling or delivery challenges that we will encounter. So that will mean that the accuracy of the profiling throughout the year will be greater than it is currently.
Thank you, Leader. Any questions? Councillor Black?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just on page 9, on the top of the Appendix C, there's 3 million underspend on Agile IT, and the comments are a bit confusing. Is this money actually to be carried forward, or is this money which is being left over after we spent the money on the new devices? Because they're talking about profiling across a 5-year capital programme going forward. So I'm just wondering, is this money going to be spread over 5 years? Do we still have money to spend and devices to buy in the current financial year? Just wondering what the situation is with regards to that budget.
If I may come in, Chair, the answers are yes, yes, and yes.
Yes.
The money hasn't been spent. It's available to be spent in future years and will be spent as devices fail. So that's a fully provided for budget, which wasn't needed to be spent all in one go. So it is about picking up on the leader's comments about better profiling it rather than just sticking it as one lump and drawing it down as needed to better recognise that it will be spent in over a period of years, but it is fully available still to be spent.
Anyone else? Anyone online? Okay, I have 2 questions. Mr. Smith, one is the capital profiling. Normally a capital profiling program starts roughly at the beginning of the project to give you an outline of purchase and availability. So how are we going to do it part of the way through any projects? Anyone can answer?
Yeah, I'll pick that up. Look, I think one of the challenges, and I'll use Castle Gardens as a good example. So the original programme, when it was put forward, had a profile of spend that was not updated as we got to the part of the delivery where we're coming to actually getting a spade in the ground now. So within the capital programme as a whole, there was a profile of spend which was ahead of where we actually knew we were going to be spending the cash. So it's those adjustments that you take account of as you get more certainty about your start times and the actual final costs of the programme. So it's those sort of adjustments that will be done more regularly.
So it's more a question of altering the timelines as opposed to the spend profile.
Yeah, so it's not so much about the numbers changing as when you will actually spend the cash.
Yeah, it's the time profile. And the other question is, when we're lending out the capital, the monies that we have available for lending, are we lending externally or are we doing self-learning for internal projects?
Mr. Smith is probably best placed to answer that one. But
Yeah.
I think Mr. Smith will answer that one.
I think we're lending back to UK government, which I think is really interesting.
It's a combination of both. As you'll be aware, I utilise my delegated powers to borrow up to the whole of the MTFP's borrowing limit, and that is temporarily predominantly loaned back to the Debt Management Office, which is a subsidiary of the HM Treasury. It is also lent to other authorities, and with elevated base rates, we've been able to achieve between 5.25% and 5.5% on that short-term cash, which is quite useful when you borrowed it at 1-point-something%, albeit it is entirely temporary because we borrowed it to spend it on capital programmes. It is also the case that I am drawing down internal cash because you will be well aware that I gave advice to council that some headroom was available to enable you to spend more as a council than you currently could technically afford, and you would defer some of the borrowing, both for the actual funding of the Mumblesea defences. I use that one as an example because that one's being built and got on with. I'll worry about the technical financing of it in due course when base rates come down much more significantly, and also a number of city centre regeneration schemes where I am internally lending to myself effectively to use cash flow to avoid having to borrow at elevated 5% plus rates. So at the moment it's win-win for this council. It will change obviously as the base rates have started to finally turn. I think they'll be slow. We'll probably touch more upon this when we get to the revenue report as well, but it's a mixture of all of them, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. Given that we borrowed a substantial amount of money for capital projects, and given that we've got to follow Treasury guidelines that we can only borrow against projects and what have you, how are we coping with the audit of the capital funding or capital amounts when we are actually lending back to ourselves or lending them back to the public sector work loan board, when that money should have been going towards projects. Are we skirting around that by saying, oh, because of the slippage?
We are partly by a result of the slippage, but let me be clear, the Treasury management policy is the only thing that gives me parameters to borrow. That Treasury policy gives me permission to borrow up to the whole of the forward capital programme, which is reapproved every year. So I borrow to the hilt to take advantage of 1.something% interest rates. It just so happens beneficially that in the short term, with that cash flow, I'm able to temporarily lend it out. I fully comply with the Treasury Management Prudential Borrowing Code, with the Treasury management policy that you have approved. Our auditors are well aware of our strategy in terms of set out in council and are well aware of what I'm doing in terms of the annual audit of the statement of accounts, and they have raised no concerns whatsoever over the strategy. I think members recognise it is extremely beneficial to this authority. It has been for several years and will continue to be for a few more years, but it complies fully with the Treasury Management Code.
Okay, thank you, Ben.
Yeah, Chair, I was very rare you'll ever hear me praise Liz Truss, but this is as a result of actions taken in UK government. I mean,
Right, can I ask you to put your mic off? You don't need...
No. But I was going to say, what Mr. Smith is saying is we took a decision to borrow at a certain point in time. UK government's policies then drove up interest rates. We've then been able to lend that money back to Treasury because we haven't deployed all of it at the time when we needed to. So there's still, I think, about 130 million of what we borrowed yet to be deployed. It will go into the projects eventually, but in the meantime, it's assisting this council with its finances. Nothing wrong with that.
I totally agree with you, but that's besides the point. Councillor Will Thomas.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just very brief, quick question for me. Just checking that the money market funds where this is invested, is it protected by the FCA? Like, are they fully deposit protected? Thanks.
Mr. Smith?
So no, because one of the corollaries is I am deemed to be a big boy. I am deemed to be competent in dealing in the wholesale money markets, so I do not have any deposit guarantee protection whatsoever. That's the reality of it. I don't put money into wholesale money market accounts. I only deal on the money markets themselves, so I don't hold them in any sort of regulated products. I have no guarantees whatsoever on my treasury management activities. That is one of the quid pro quos of being deemed to be an active large player in the money markets. That's not unique to Swansea. That's a case for every council. So there is risk on that. The amounts we're dealing with swamp any sort of protection. Our treasury rules for local government are quite boring and staid. Some authorities do invest in certificates of deposit and other things where you can have movements on the capital value of those products. I tend to just go plain vanilla, and it's just wholesale money market lending. I have no protection, same as every other treasurer in the whole of the UK. You can't have it both ways. So that's why we have the Treasury policy on investments and restrict who we will lend to and who we deem to be credit worthy. So there is always that risk. Although I am very comfortable in terms of making money on the money markets, there is that theoretical risk, and councils have in the past been burned when things surprise. But we're very low risk in terms of who we're lending to. We don't chase the rate particularly. I'm only interested in protecting the capital value. But short answer is no, we don't have protections. No local authority does.
Okay, are the money markets specifically run by the banks, or are they just? Can you just give me a bit more detail of who actually?
Yeah, so there are a number of sorry, apologies, I went too early, Councillor Thomas. Apologies.
Sorry, my internet. I talked over you then. Sorry, apologies for that.
My profuse apologies for talking. Yep.
Sorry, who would need to fail for these deposits to be at risk? Thanks.
So you would need you'd need wholesale counterparties to fail, which would be UK clearing banks, UK banks with a UK banking license, and overseas institutions, but only if regulated themselves to conduct investment and corporate banking activities in the UK. So they themselves are all regulated and subject to FCA approval. and such like. It's just that I do not get any depositor protection simply because of the nature of the sums we're dealing in. We are deemed to be as big as any of the other players in the market. It's managed by a set of market makers and a set of independent brokers, and it's done on a matched bargain basis between individual banks. But they're all banks you will have heard of, and they must crucially all have a UK banking license to be able to accept deposits. We can't just put it somewhere completely random without any UK authorization. So there is a degree of oversight in terms of the institutions as a whole. It's just that I do not get any personal protection, nor does any other local authority in the land.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? No, that being the case, thank you very much, Councillor. Mr. Smith, can we move on to item 7, the revenue finance outturn 23-24? Leader? Over to you, Mr. Smith.
So again, I'll be brief in terms of my technical advice because the report itself is relatively straightforward, but there are a few key matters to draw your attention to. As I took it to Cabinet, I was at pains to make clear that 23-24 was an extremely unusual year. You had elevated rates of inflation. The budget was set with substantial amounts held in central inflation. The budget was also set with very substantial increases in service revenue budgets financed by a planned very large draw from revenue reserves. So you get an outturn report, which I say is nothing but unequivocally good news because it's a report that's able to add several £1 million to general reserves, ultimately add substantial amounts to a number of earmarked reserves, including the capital equalisation reserve. But crucially, it was effectively drawing less from earmarked reserves than was originally planned. So we drew less than the whole of the £20 million from central inflation, which was a hedge against those raised energy costs. And we did not draw all of the Economic Recovery Fund money. And crucially, as following on from the previous item, we had an exceptional year in Treasury management performance terms. You know, much has been made of the scale of debt this authority has relative to others, but you will see in that general fund outturn report, the whole lot was serviced net for less than 7 million quid's worth of interest. I think that is going to be impossible to repeat going forward in full value simply because rates have started to turn and we are drawing down cash, but I still expect it to provide dividends for a few more years for this authority in terms of temporary relief from a number of pressures that continue to arise. You will see quite a few bold entries in the report because the report is a complicated one. There is much to celebrate short term. There is much to fear going forward across the whole of the public sector. The budget was set with a requirement for £25 million worth of savings. Council tax nominally up about £6 million, over £30 million added to block grant, revenue support grant. I think any treasurer in the land would punch the air with delight if they were to get anything like another £30 million a year uplift. So the outlook is challenging, particularly for social care, which has exhausted its adults earmarked reserves. There are real concerns about homelessness pressures. There are pressures on waste. There are pressures in children's services, and the report also indicates that there was a relatively modest draw from schools reserves in the year, and our schools still hold very high reserves compared to any other authority in Wales. But again, they are also drawing from reserves. So there is much to celebrate short term, much to worry about longer term. I do want members to understand that much of the gain is temporary because of some of the windfalls we've managed on Treasury management. I will take them, I will add them to earmarked reserves. I thought it was prudent to give Cabinet advice to also top up general reserves. It's the first time they've been topped up in the last 7 years, just to bolster and protect for some of the risks that this authority, like all authorities in the land, face. I think the report otherwise is relatively straightforward and clear in terms of what's good, what's not so good, and what may be about to come in terms of some of the pressures that all authorities face. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. Leader?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously, firstly, I wanted to thank Mr. Smith and his Treasury team for all the work that they've done, and obviously, certainly for the management of our borrowing and financing, which has assisted the budget significantly. In terms of Cabinet's decision, just to refer to that, when we looked at these reports at Cabinet recently, you'll know that Cabinet made a determination to allocate some funds. Some of those can be done through delegation, and some of them will need further reports, which obviously Scrutiny will have the opportunity to scrutinise. But essentially, given the pressures that Mr. Smith referenced in social care, the intention was to allocate a further £6 million into social care to assist with that. Again, all authorities across Wales are seeing some significant pressures in the social care system. It is one where we hope that both the Welsh Government and UK Government, the new UK Government, take action as quickly as possible to bolster the resources in our social care sector. On top of that, there are some additional allocations that we propose to make out of the surplus, which will see investment into skate parks. We'd already made an announcement of £1 million in the budget previously. Now we have a defined scheme that we can bring forward. We believe that funding is insufficient to deliver the sort of programme that we'd like, of the scale that we would like to see. So we're proposing an additional £1 million to assist with the skate parks. On top of that, we're proposing to add to the £7.1 million that we announced in the budget for roads resurfacing and highways works. So that would take that to 8.1. On top of that, we then propose to enhance the the community investment fund. As you know, at budget, we announced £1 million for community investment. Members can use their community budgets, or they can allocate other sources of funding that they've been able to secure, whether it be SPF or others, to draw down a 70% match, so 30% from the local members or other funds against a 70% draw from the central fund. We expected the £1 million that we put into that community investment fund to be exhausted relatively quickly, given the speed at which applications were coming in. So we've taken the opportunity to highlight that we intend to increase that fund to £2 million to allow local members to deliver more for their communities. We've also then increased the amount of money for free bus rides and free bus services during the holidays. We anticipate that running for the full calendar year again, full financial year again. We'd set that initial budget about £450,000 in the budget, but we think it'll cost around 600 or so for the full year. So again, making some additional allocation provision there. And then finally, we know that given the huge expansion of active travel routes that we've had in Swansea, I think we've done more than any other local authority in Wales, and we've had the lion's share of Welsh Government funding. We need to purchase some additional equipment to help our teams deal with overgrowth in some of the more rural bits of the active travel network. So again, some funding allocated, about 60,000 there to help purchase additional equipment. So those were a number of announcements at Cabinet. Some will require, as I said, further reports to Cabinet to allow them to be enacted. Others can be done under delegation. We'll take advice from Mr. Smith and from the legal officers about which is the correct route for that. But we wanted to signal early, especially ahead of this session, the announcements that we intend to make out of that. Just more broadly, obviously, as Mr. Smith has said, our schools are in the process of reducing their reserves down. There has been a more modest draw from our schools' reserves than we otherwise would have anticipated this year. And our advice to schools is to continue to draw on their reserves where they need to ensure the money reaches the children. You'll know that we allocated the entire IT reserve to schools this year in a one-off £7 million boost to finances in Swansea. That places us close to the top of the league of investment in schools this year for schools across Wales. But the challenges remain, as Mr. Smith has said. So we will see what the UK Government budget brings late in a couple of months' time. And obviously, we'll be lobbying Welsh Government heavily for allocations from that budget if there are consequentials to come to local government. The announcements that the new government have already made in terms of extra teachers and GP appointments are likely to have consequentials for Wales, but we will see when the detail is published in the budget or the autumn statement later this year. What I would say longer term is, whilst we remain in a very strong position, as Mr. Smith has said in other venues, we have the highest gearing of any council in terms of its debt to resources. We also have, as I said at council, when you strip out the money that we've set aside for repayments plus the money that we borrowed for buying out the housing account, our actual equivocal debt to the rest of Wales is less than half of what's published as the headline figure. So our ability to fund schemes is still strong. But depending on what future settlements look like, we will be in a similar position to other councils where pressures will continue to build on the revenue side of the house. So it should not come as a surprise to anybody that we do in future years draw from reserves. The capital equalisation reserve, for instance, was set aside to make sure that we didn't have to raise extra council tax or others to offset some of the costs of borrowing and investment. Mr. Smith has alluded to the fact that he has moved, again, figures from this report into reserves. So I do expect us to draw from reserves in future years because we want to continue with the high levels of investment in our communities, even if we don't get all of the money that we require from UK and Welsh Government.
Thank you, Leader. Can I remind members that this scrutiny panel is to examine the facts that the Leader and Mr. Smith have talked about, and the report is not a political statement. Okay, thank you. Councillor Peter Black.
I think that,
Will Thomas.
I see how you can take politics out of this because it is a political forum. I just want to make the question in relation to what the warnings which Ben referred to, and of course which are quite heavily bolded in the report itself. I mean, obviously the extra investment which the Leader has announced is very welcome, particularly the £6 million into social services, the extra £1 million for roads, which is still £200,000 less than the previous year, mind, but it's still getting there. We're getting there slowly. What are the actual risks involved in spending that money now rather than holding it on for those future pressures which come forward? I mean, is there a risk? Is there a risk analysis here? Are we anticipating that money might have been better saved and spent at a later date, or do we think we can do this without taking significant risk for future financing? I'd be interested in Leader's and Ben's response on this.
So I'll give my political answer first, which is yes, we could have made the decision to just take every bit of unplanned outturn cash and put it into some sort of reserve or contingency. I don't think that would have been sensible because the reality is you deal with what's before you, and clearly there are pressures in the social care system that need to be addressed now. If we didn't address them now, they're going to be worse later on. So I don't think there's needs for a detailed business case about that. The numbers speak for themselves, the pressures speak for themselves. On the other ones, well, again, as you said, clearly we would have liked to have seen more than £66,000 of extra capital being allocated for us in last year's settlement. That is the total amount of extra capital we had as an authority. So the money that we've been able to invest in the roads and highways this year has primarily come from our own resources. And I think it's important that we continue to do that because we know that roads, potholes, repairs, the pledge that we've made, all of those things are important to the public. So again, it's about us politically saying, well, you, the public, have told us these things are important to you, and this is how we're responding when we're able to do so. The other schemes in terms of community investment, again, I think members have been extremely positive about the announcements to have additional monies for their communities on top of their community budgets. And again, one of the challenges that many members have raised with us is that their community budgets can't often get them some of the bigger schemes that they would like. So this is allowing local members elected in their own wards to make decisions on what they believe the priorities are for their own wards. I think that's an important democratic principle that we should continue to support. Skate parks, we've given a commitment on doing that. You'll know £7 million has gone in already to upgrade all of our council-run play areas. Another of that £2 million was for accessibility equipment within those parks. So this is adding to that health and well-being investment that we've promised for some time. I know Councillor Francis Davis has been doing a lot of work on how we could deploy a skate park network. It's much more technical than I think the play areas because we've got existing parks and play areas which were easier to upgrade. This is about getting the right mix of skate facilities in the right places, and that has meant going out to the skater community to understand what their needs are, what the sorts of things they would require. We could have just replaced all of the metal half pipes we've got. Clearly that isn't what skaters want these days. So again, it's about that broader offering, because the play areas, I think, are ones that service children probably up to the age of 10 or 12. When you get into the teenager ages, you want something different in your park. And again, this is about trying to meet that provision. But your core point is we've done both, essentially. We've deployed some of the resources, we think, sensibly into the areas where we are hearing priorities from residents, or that we know there are pressures. But there is a a chunk of money that has gone into reserves exactly for the point you're making, which is we can deploy that at a future date when need arises.
Okay, Mr. Smith?
So as the leader has said in response to the answer, to some extent, these are policy choices and political choices, and there is much we don't know. I would remind, and I did counsel, that we do not know the local government pay award for this year. We don't know the teachers' pay award. Whilst there's been an announcement for England, it's a devolved matter to Wales. So there are certainly risks, there are certainly unknowns. It was patently obvious to me that there was going to be a significant social care overspend. There are risks in homelessness, waste, and other things too. So the decision is a policy one. In terms of bold facts, the budget last year was set with 0 in balance sheet contingency. At year end, as well as adding 2 million to general reserves, members, I was able to advise, had 12 million pounds in balance sheet contingency. That's money rolled forward, and they have proposed 6 for social care, various other items, as the leader said, some that require decisions of cabinet, 9 of 12 being committed straight up front. I'm a treasurer. I'm always going to say I'd preferred it not to be 9 or 12. I'd have preferred a bit more in jam jars, but I entirely understand why members took policy choices. But in terms of the maths and the metrics, having 12 million rolled forward in balance sheet contingency, having set the current year's contingency at between 3 and 5 million, having set central inflation at 10 million pounds, I am satisfied at a technical level that there are no risks in the short term to those decisions having been made early. And it is incredibly helpful, particularly to social care colleagues, for that initial indication of the £6 million worth of temporary support and investment into social care, because I would agree and echo the leader's comments that the alternative would have been that we would have required at first quarter significant action to be taken. So I'm satisfied at this stage it is within the bounds of possibility. Nothing is certain in the current year. We do not know a whole raft of things in terms of promises from previous governments around teachers' pensions grants. We do not know exactly what will come in terms of Barnett consequentials for the raft of announcements made recently by UK government in terms of extra teachers. Should be a Barnett for that. As the leader has said, other things that there should be Barnets for, Barnett consequentials for, but we simply do not know. But in the order of magnitude of things, I was relatively relaxed in terms of the political choices, albeit I was rightly at pains to make clear, and Cabinet received that advice, that several of them do require further decisions effectively at first quarter to enable appropriate scrutiny to take place. But effectively, the 3 big £1 million plus items, the social care one was not money directly given to social services. It was effectively an early signal to indicate that we would use some of that rolled forward contingency and in-year contingency to offset any spending pressure in social care. The Director of Social Services will continue to endeavour to bear down on social care as a whole to make sure that he doesn't just spend unlimited sums. I'm absolutely certain of that, but it's very useful to give an early steer, so I thought that was appropriate for members to give that indication at Cabinet.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just
Councillor
ask
Buck, do
a
you want to
question
come back?
about capacity? Because I know in terms of this extra £2 million you've got now, and for various little schemes, I'm now trying to spend some in my ward. The officers have said they don't have the capacity to actually spend the money. And I am concerned that, you know, with a number of individual schemes coming out of these various pots of money, that we don't have the capacity in amongst the officers to actually be able to draw the schemes up and actually deliver them within the timescale which is available to them. So are we actually putting any extra capacity into place to deal with that, or is that an issue which we're able to look at?
Yeah, absolutely right. And often spending money is as difficult as saving it. So I do share your pain on that one, Councillor Black. What we've done, Councillor Francis Davis, Councillor Stevens, other Cabinet members have met with their lead officers. There has been a challenge in terms of some of the resources being pulled to do some other priorities, which has meant they're not available to do the quotes that they would normally do. What we're looking at, we've also unfortunately lost one of our project managers that we just recruited who's decided to take another job offer. So we're in the process of refilling that post. One of the principles is I've asked the head of the directorate, Mark Wade, to come back with some proposals as to what they would need in terms of some additional resource, which we can fund to enable members to get all of their quotes done. I think where we will need a little bit of understanding from members is obviously that will then go into a programme over the next couple of years. So what we'll try and do is get members the quotes they need. If they want to then proceed with the scheme, it'll then go into a program and you'll get given an indicative date for delivery, which you can then share with your community, as we've done on the schemes. But yeah, we've got a temporary issue in terms of we lost a bit of resource. We do need to refill that, and then we need to make sure that members get the quotes they need.
Councillor Will Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. If I could just revisit one of the comments, I was a bit concerned that, so I'd just like a bit more information. I didn't write the figure down, so forgive me if the figure's wrong. But the 7 million for IT, which has been paid up front to schools. So I understood it, or I think I understood that was money for the next 3 to 4 years for IT equipment. Does that mean by spending it all at once that we don't have any money in the next few years for IT equipment? And secondly, was that all spent on IT? Thank you.
Yeah, Councillor Thomas, if I just do the first bit, Ben. Yeah, so in the budget in March, you'll have heard me say that we were going to allow schools to access the school's IT reserve in its entirety, which was set at £7.1 million. Prior to that, myself and Mr. Smith had detailed discussions with heads and the schools around the fact that we were looking at all avenues to bolster the settlement that the schools had been given. So, as we know, there were little or no consequentials from education coming across from UK government into Wales, which left Wales in a very difficult position in terms of its settlement. We decided locally we would intervene in any way we could, really, to bolster the resources for schools. The quid pro quo on that is that that IT reserve will need to be replenished over the forthcoming years. I don't think, Mr. Smith will correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that reserve was due to be used until 2030 or 2032, so it's a few years off yet. So one of the actions we already took was to replenish part of that reserve with some of the outturn and some of the other monies that we've had. So we've started that process already in terms of the decisions we've made. But the reality is, if we don't get money from UK government as a consequential, it cannot be handed on by the Welsh government, either colour. If the UK government and the Treasury do not make the money available and it does not come through as a Barnett consequential, it cannot be handed on. And we were in the same position as all other local authorities in Wales in that our schools' pressures, Mr. Smith mentioned pay and others, were sufficiently bigger than the money we were given to support our schools. So that's why we took the action to deploy a reserve. It is a dramatic action to deploy an entire reserve in one go, but it was done on the basis that we will replenish that reserve by the time it's needed.
Okay. Is that okay, Councillor Thomas? Oh, sorry,
yeah,
Ben.
Interested to hear Ben's comment first. Thanks, Chair.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Ben,
building on from what the leader has said, and to emphasise, because we've had discussion before about what this is. For the avoidance of doubt, whilst it's called a school's ICT reserve, it was the council's reserve that had set aside £7 million. So it wasn't money ever given over by schools to the council, it's the other way around. Council decided to spend its £7 million of schools' ICT reserves. It's entirely separate to the schools' delegated budgets to turbo boost for the reasons the leader has said, and it was dramatic. Ordinarily, you can imagine your treasurer behind the scenes doing his absolute nut if an entire reserve to be spent over the next 10 years was spent in one go. The leader and I were very honest and open and transparent with School Budget Forum. They understood the risks of taking the whole jam jar in one go. They entirely endorsed the approach for the reasons that the leader has said, and I won't repeat them. The bit I was going to come in on and say was, yes, absolutely, it is to be spent over the next 10 years. Some of it will only be needed sooner rather than later, but the bulk of it spent over the 10 years. And as the leader alluded to, and for the avoidance of doubt, in the outturn, Education's underspend enabled £2.1 million, the first 3 years of that 10-year programme, to be immediately put back in at outturn. And the anticipation is that we will continue to make sure that we top it up in future years. Don't forget the budget was set for 24-25 with strict advice from myself and endorsed by council to budget for £700,000 a year to be added into that school's ICT reserve. So that's built into the base budget assumptions. You'll remember right at the last minute there was a bit of additional money in the revenue support grant, and the largest amount was put directly into the base budget to make sure that it's topped up. So you've now got the bonus of both. You've got base budget putting £700,000 a year back into that, probably some underspend on education to be able to top it up a bit more at this year's outturn, and also the first 3 years repaid of that borrowing from the jam jar straight at outturn. So I've given myself some headroom and effectively enough time to continue to be topping it up. I'm absolutely confident we will have exactly the right amounts we need to spend at any point over the 10-year period. But crucially, the takeaway is this was the council putting its reserves in. It wasn't money taken off schools. It will ultimately be spent on schools' ICT infrastructure because it was a term and condition of the grant we received in the first place when it was originally funded by Welsh Government.
Okay, Councillor Thomas. Councillor Mary Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Peter Black took my question, one of them, about the capability and about obviously the officer that had left. But I've got another question, which is on the page that I was looking for. It's about the commuted sum to do with homelessness and affordable housing. I've just lost it now. It's said that you've had a commuted sum to help with buying back properties, to help with social care. I do sit on planning, but I was just wondering, I thought every planning application that we get in front of us now, there is an element of affordable housing built into the actual scheme. So where is the money coming from that is being put as a 106 monies? Because I know years ago, if it was somewhere very expensive, for example, on Gower, we did commute sums so that affordable housing could be somewhere in the area, but perhaps not on that scheme. So I was just wondering where it's appeared from, and also do we only buy back council properties, or are we looking to buy back other properties as they do in Carmarthen?
So I take the general point about buyback, and Mr. Smith, if you can answer the commuted sum point. Yeah, I was just looking to see if I could find the reference. In terms of buying back houses, obviously the biggest constraint for us is that the houses we buy need to be Welsh Quality Housing Standard, and therefore some of the housing stock that we would otherwise potentially look at are not able to be considered unless they can be converted in a reasonable way. So that's one of the constraints we face. You'll know that we're taking a number of actions at the moment on the homelessness side, which comes out of the general fund rather than out of the HRA, in terms of temporary accommodation, to try and establish a greater supply of temporary accommodation, which will help us deal with some of those pressures that we are facing in homelessness at the moment.
So it's page 20. I've just found it for everybody's reference.
So perhaps if I come in, Chair, yes, there are always on the balance sheet substantial unspent commuted sums. We're not always able to spend them on things that we would like to have spent them on, albeit we have obligations to spend it in accordance with the terms of the commuted sum. So the decision was taken to draw down sums on the balance sheet to aid the position overall, and to enter into an arrangement where it was beneficial to both the general fund and the HRA. So those commuted sums have been sat on balance sheet, held on behalf of others, or to be deployed for the acquisition of suitable housing stock. And the decision was taken in conjunction with place colleagues and taking very clear advice from the planning officers that it was in accordance with the terms and conditions of the original planning consent and the terms of Section 106, that it was reasonable and prudent to do so, and thus benefit ultimately the HRA effectively by drawing down sums from the general fund and allowing social housing provision through the HRA. I think it's also something that is further being explored by the new UK government to look to expand that further in England. And I'm sure Welsh Government will look to do the same going forward in Wales, albeit that's policy matters for them.
Councillor Chris Evans.
Just a quick one. I know you mentioned that there was money being set aside for equipment for maintenance of active travel routes. I was just wondering if that includes any gritters to keep them open in winter.
No, this is specifically investment for cutting back of overgrowth. So smaller equipment that can navigate the narrower active travel routes.
Just ask going back to Mary's question on the Section 106 Affordable Housing Reserve, is it possible to have a notice to how much is in that reserve, and after you've drawn down the 1.6 million, of course, and under what circumstances money added to it? Because as Mary says, the normally in terms of affordable housing, you have a development, you say so many units have to be affordable, and you don't tend to get a sum of money from that. So I'm just interested in what circumstances money is added to that reserve, and how much we've got in it.
Yes, I'll make sure
Uh,
arrangements are made
yeah.
for a follow-up written note from myself and the Director of Place.
Okay. The one thing I would add, Leader, is obviously any more money to any of the services is more than to be welcomed, especially for social care and obviously for roads, etc. The one thing that disappoints is the fact that we can't do this in the budget, and it's got to be done after the budget is set in March. It's done through the year. I've taken the point that Mr. Smith has said about scrutiny of it. That is the problem, I think, that when you add money in the budget through the year, the chances of us either having to call something in or not actually saying that it should go to scrutiny. And I think that's one of the issues that we will need to look at in the future. And that is, how do we scrutinise a budget and then the budget is altered halfway through, albeit for the benefit of the community, and understand that, but at the same time, we do have an obligation to scrutinise whatever money is spent of the public purse. So I think those issues will be needed to be discussed in the future. But I do welcome the fact that the extra money is available, and I do take Mr. Smith's point that some of this will have to have an additional report and scrutinised. Leader.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And look, I'm on the same page as you. One of the reasons why I wanted to run through all of those items again here today, and make the point that you will have an opportunity to scrutinise the reports that will be associated with some of those announcements ahead of the decision being considered by Cabinet, is very much at that point. I think the challenge is, and Mr. Smith will, I'm sure, give us both the same advice, is that unfortunately outturn is never going to be completed by the time that we have to set the budget for the future year. So I can't announce or propose to invest something when I don't have the outturn figures. The reality is we're privileged to be in a position where we've got extra resources to deploy. I didn't want to leave at Cabinet a sum of money hanging with no decisions, especially given the advice that we'd had from social services officers about the pressures that are building there. So it's an imperfect system, but I think the principle of making sure that scrutiny get the opportunity to scrutinise any potential announcements and investments, absolutely right. And that's why there is a set of reports following that intentional announcement at Cabinet of what we intend to do.
Mr. Smith?
Yes, I'd agree with what is said, but I would also add one further thing that did particularly complicate 22-23's statement of accounts, then 23-24's monitoring, 23-24's outturn, and also the 24-25 budget. Members would be well aware we struggled as an authority, like lots of authorities, because the sector is under pressure to produce timely accounts. The statement of accounts was only approved for 23-24 very late on in March, after we'd already set the budget for 24-25, and there exceptionally was a requirement from the auditors to enable me to get an unqualified opinion to write back a very substantial provision to 22-23. So that did further complicate it. You always will have an overlap and you won't get outturned till long after you've set the budget. But there was a further complicating factor, which was exceptionally unusual for this authority. We got very close to being in a position where we were setting a budget before we and the current year's position before we'd even signed off the previous year's statement of accounts, even though that was long after the point at which we declared outturn. It was far from perfect. It heightened my pressure, my blood pressure and tensions enormously. It did not help the position and has clouded and confused some of the surprise, shall we say, in terms of scale of underspend at the end of year, albeit members on this panel will be well aware we'd indicated services would be benefiting from substantial use of reserves, that there would be a significant underspend on capital financing, but I don't like counting my chickens too early, so I was never going to declare a £17 million underspend on a £24 million interest pot early on. But I think it is worth recognising that this last year was exceptionally unusual because of the lateness of getting the accounts signed off by our auditors, of which I'm indicating is as much my responsibility, because we did really struggle to get the accounts through on time, and you ended up with several years open at once. Fortunately, all closed off, unqualified opinion, and we're now in the same rinse repeat cycle, but I'm really confident we will be handing over the accounts much earlier this year to the auditors than last year, which will help inform some of the position, albeit again, they're handed over long after the budget has been set. So the rest of what's been said still remains valid. But I did just want to reflect on that and recognise that there was a particularly unusual set of circumstances where the previous year's final position was approved after the the preceding years was agreed. It ended up being, I didn't know what year I was talking about. I had about 4 years open in my head at once.
I tend to agree with that because of the complication of COVID and the fact that we did have an overrun on COVID, and we did have problems with the spend and the way in which the accounts were balanced out over those 2-year period, which made the matters of 2022-23 that much worse. And I recognise the fact that we didn't close off the accounts. So potentially this is a one-off because prior to 2018, the outturn was never the same sort of level as we got now. We did have some changes, but very little. Now we're talking about changes in the region of 10, 12 million pounds. So I think there is that exception. I understand that. But I think in future, we need to look at that if there's going to be that much increase in the public spend, that there needs to be a method by which we can look at it. I accept the fact that some of these don't need that because of the size of the exemptions, but some of them, like you said, the £1 million ones, will have to have that report, and we will be looking at that report in scrutiny. But thank you very much for your explanation. Thank you all. Can I move on to item 8 on the agenda? There's no other questions, and that is the revenue outturn housing revenue account. Can I also hand over to Councillor Peter Black as Deputy Chair? Thank you.
Ben, do you want to introduce this?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I will be brief again on this one. On this one, you get a bit of a 2-for, a 2-for-1. Although it's badged as the revenue outturn for the HRA, you will all be aware that a substantial amount of the Housing Revenue Account Capital Programme is itself financed by revenue contributions to capital from the HRA. So the report itself sets out a significant underspend on the HRA, which is proposed added to reserves which Cabinet so endorsed when it received my report. The table on the second page, page 32, makes clear we reduced revenue contributions to capital expenditure of some £11 million to engineer an even bigger than usual surplus on the HRA. In accordance with normal fashion, the underspend is added to reserves, rolls over, is used to then fund the increased HRA capital spend in the following year. The report does also draw attention to some risks that all of the 11 HRA authorities face. So there was also a deliberate action on my part, and it is part of the reason why we also explored that interaction on the previous item where we're just discussing around use of commuted sums and the interplay between general fund and HRA, to seek to get as big a reserve balance as possible, because there are some risks, pan whales, that we are waiting for legal cases to be heard and pan out. So the report itself is relatively straightforward. It's the normal fashion of underspend, increase the reserve, carry it over to fund the capital programme, but with an additional deliberate intervention by myself and officers in place to seek to maximise the level of HRA reserves as a protection against any risks, given that there are some on a pan whales basis that are yet to be resolved as a result of tests in court. The report itself is otherwise relatively straightforward, and as I say, you get effectively both revenue and capital bundled in a 2-for-1 deal on this one. That's all I've got to say in terms of technical advice.
Thank you, Ben. Rob, do you want to add anything? No. It does occur to me the housing revenue account is quite under scrutinised in society, so maybe we'll have a look at that at some stage in the future. But we haven't got Carol here at the moment, so there's no point going into any detail on that. Has anybody got any questions on this particular report? No? Okay, thank you, Ben. Thank you very much for that report, and we shall move on then. Right, the next item is item 9, which is City Centre retail update. Leaders here, Councillor Robert Francis Davis. We've also got Paul Relf, Lisa Wells, and Russell Greenslade from the Chief Executive. Sorry? And Phil Holmes, of course. Yes, I've just come to Phil. And Russell Greenslade from the Chief Executive of the Swansea bid. You can introduce this, Robert?
No, I'll hand over to Mr. Holmes, who will take us
Okay,
through this.
Phil. Okay, Phil.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so this report is an update on city centre retail, and just to say what we tried to do is reflect the advice that you gave us as a panel in terms of the key things that you wanted us to report on. So that was really helpful. So thank you for that. So this follows the report that we presented back in November 2022. So it's been a little while, and it's good to report a lot of progress since then, in particular with the regeneration program. So we've been, as you know, we've been busy delivering some of these major investments for the city. The arena, obviously, has been very successful. The coastal park, the bridge over Oystermouth Road, and also pleased to say as well that 71, 72 Kingsway is due to open in a matter of weeks. And of course, all of that stuff there, it's major investment for the city. And what it does really, it creates jobs and it creates opportunities for visitors and spend, which of course supports the retail sector in Swansea. It's not just the new shiny buildings that we've been focusing on, though. We've also been trying to address some of the heritage issues that we have in the city. So buildings like the Palace Theatre, which that is nearing completion now. That would be a fantastic transformation for that part of High Street. Also, the BHS unit on Oxford Street as well. So a redundant retail unit. What can we do with that? Well, the concept there is a public services hub. So again, it's trying to do the things that will support retail, create more footfall, create more vibrancy, create more spend, give retailers a reason to invest in the city and stay in the city long term. All of this stuff hasn't been without challenges. We had the Copper Bay contractor go into administration, and that's the risk when you work on projects like this, unfortunately. But that's all behind us now. We have a new contractor to finish those works. And I suppose one of the most pleasing things with all of this investment that we're making is the response that we've seen from the private sector. So local companies as well. So the development down at Princess Quarter, which is a first-class scheme. The development up at Kingsway, the biophilic building. And these are local companies who've really responded and embraced the investment that we're making and seeing opportunities for them for the future. So it's great to see that. And there's so many others as well I could mention. Some smaller stuff that you probably wouldn't even notice, but new residential units above shops. So they would have been vacant. Now there's people living in there. So again, it's trying to create a more vibrant city by bringing more people to work and live in the city. We've also been busy at the market as well. I'll come on to that in a second, but lots of investment taking place there. So that's great news. And also Castle Square is due to start. So it's not just the stuff that we've done or the stuff in the pipeline. There's a whole strategy here that's unfolding. And a big part of that is Urban Splash, the council's strategic development partner. So we're working with them. So the schemes that they've got on the drawing board at the moment, the public sector hub over at the former St David's Shopping Centre, that is moving forward at pace, and that of course will create opportunities to redevelop the civic centre as the council relocates from there to the public sector hub in the fullness of time. So all of this stuff that we're doing, this agenda, it's all part of a strategic plan, and I want to mention the work that we have commissioned recently on a placemaking plan. So this follows the city centre framework, you may remember, probably 20 years ago now, and then something that we call the SCARF document, which was another regeneration framework. And what they did was they guided investment, and they gave the council the confidence to invest, but they also gave the private sector the confidence to invest as well. So we realised that we've achieved so much, but we now have to have the next plan for the future of the city, and that's why we're working on this. We commissioned some specialist retail and leisure consultancy advice, and that is helping us plug the gaps. Where are the gaps in terms of the retail and leisure offer, and how can we fit that within our existing city to support existing retailers and attract new ones. And all of that is coming to fruition now. There'll be some public consultation taking place, and we'll have a new plan with development zones, a new vision, an action plan, which is the most important thing, which underpins all the future investments. You asked about Swansea market, and I'm pleased to say it's performing really, really well. Occupancy is at 94%, and when you think the national average for markets is 72%, so it's doing really well. And also we've seen footfall bouncing back as well. So the market itself, obviously we call it a jewel in the crown, and for good reason too. It is very special, and people of Swansea love it. But interestingly, people outside Swansea are taking notice of the market as well. So we've just won the best large indoor market for the 3rd time. This is a UK award, so that's phenomenal recognition. And colleagues were also asked to present at the national conference as well for the Market Federation. So that was fantastic. And our market supervisor was even awarded Market Manager of the Year. So it just shows it's not just the local customer base. People are seeing the market from outside and thinking about best practice and what they can learn from us. And of course, I should mention as well the investments as well. So things like the public toilets, things like the market garden, communal area, and now the entranceways, which we will be on site with shortly. All of that, I think, is just adding to the offer that we have at the market. You asked about footfall. We do have cameras around the city centre, and we do monitor footfall. We also look at national trends as well. And quite interestingly, since the COVID pandemic, there has been a bit of a bounce back in terms of footfall. And nationally, we saw a 3.3% increase in footfall from January 23 to December 23. And that, I'm pleased to say, is reflected by what we're seeing in Swansea as well. So our footfall, there's a chart here, bar chart, but really what it's showing is a increase in footfall during the period from 2022 to 2023, increasing by 3.2%. I do hope that's the start of a new trend, and we're going to see a resurgence and get back to those pre-COVID levels. But obviously time will tell in terms of how that plays out. You asked about spend. We don't, as a council, we don't hold spend data, and it is very expensive to buy it in, so we don't do that. But what we do have is very good links with the Quadrant, and they have data on all of their sales, and it was amazing to see how in 2023 they had a 17% year-on-year increase in sales. And you compare that to the national average of 1.7%. It's, that's fantastic. Now, I'm not saying that's the same for the rest of the city centre, because we don't know, but it's great. If that's a microcosm, then it's fantastic to see that. You asked for an update on the arena as well, and we've had 350,000 visitors since the opening of the arena, and some fantastic shows, and all those people can't be wrong. It's a great offer, and I suppose one of the key things that struck me when reading this report was in terms of the catchment for those people who've been to the arena. I thought it would be a local-ish catchment, and it is, the SA postcode in terms of the region, but you've also got the CF postcodes, and even as far as your Swindon and Exeter and Reading, and even internationally, there are people visiting the arena whilst they're here as tourists. So it's great to see, and I know ATG are delighted with it as well. I mentioned national accolades in terms of the market, but I just wanted to mention Copper Bay. There's a journal called the Estates Gazette. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's used by professional property and regeneration people. It's the leading journal. They actually shortlisted Copper Bay as one of their awards for City of the Year. We were shortlisted for alongside 4 cities. We didn't win it, but it was, again, fantastic to have that recognition. Debenhams, you asked about, and of course that was a blow to the city losing Debenhams, key part of the retail circuit, and you know, the council had to intervene because it was deemed market failure. So yeah, in May 23 we acquired the building, and since then we've been flat out commissioning surveys. We've got agents on board. Discussions are taking place with all the interested parties, and you know, a lot of progress has been made there. And you know, just to, as a short-term measure, there's some images in the report just to show what we've done in terms of just trying to improve the look of the unit in the short term. So that's all going in the right direction for us, I'm pleased to say. And you also mentioned the Dragon Hotel as well. So yeah, they've got planning permission now for a multifunctional, biodiverse, modular green wall system, with new windows and all of that. So the whole facade is going to be lifted. It's going to look fantastic. We're told that's going to start this summer. So I don't think it started yet, but hopefully that'll start very soon, if not the summer, in the autumn. And I think that's the report. I just wanted to sort of say that, you know, the regeneration of the city, everyone recognises it as ambitious, and it's great to see the private sector responding to it. It's great to see the market bouncing back. It's great to see the success of the arena, and I think we're doing the right things in terms of intervening in market failure with things like the Debenhams store, and you know, and the footfall is bouncing back as well. So it is a positive message, and hopefully this is the start of a trend moving forward, following the COVID pandemic. So happy to take any questions. We've got colleagues here who are far more familiar with some of this stuff than me, so hopefully we can deal with those.
But when is the placemaking plan likely to be available for us to look at?
Ask Lee to comment on that.
Aiming to conclude the draft in October.
So we look at that near the end of the year then?
So looking at it at the end of the year.
Okay, thanks. Russell, do you want to add anything to this at all? We're very happy to have you here.
Thank you very much. Good morning all. Just to, obviously, where the boots on the ground, so where the business is. So in the last 2024, we have roughly 15 new businesses which have opened up. And I envisage more of those will be coming because there is an air of more confidence, as what Phil is saying, in the city centre, what's going on as well. Talking to our stakeholders, roughly around 42% are now expecting to invest in their workforce as a growing business as well, which is another positive for the area. However, we're still in a bit of a perfect storm as businesses, with a mix of business rates and all the costs that are going on, and the bottom line costs, which is hindering that growth side of it. But there is more of a buoyancy area from the feedback we've had. Safety's been a big thing in the city centre, which we've stepped up and we've dealt with that, working with South Wales Police, the council and other partners as well. And interestingly enough, safety is even more so a factor of investment from businesses at the moment of their staff. So it's really proactive that Swansea and Swansea City Centre in partnership working, we've stepped up to that on the services that we provide, excuse me. For businesses, it's great to have the political stability nationally as well, because that was hindering growth and investment side of it. So feedback from businesses, right, we can get on, we can help grow the economy, and we can now start employing more people as well. We're experiencing an increase in activity from private sector investors, as what Phil is saying, and that is a direct result of what the council has done. That's what's happened, and obviously we got bids all around the UK, and the interest in Swansea, we're very firmly on the radar. And again, that's down to the sheer size of the investment which is going on in our city centre as a growing city. So interesting comments which are coming back as well, that we're firmly on the radar now for who we need to be. We just need to capitalise that working together. Also, trade is generally robust across the sectors. As I said, you've got footfall, but we as an organisation working with possibly the local authority, really do need to look at spend, because we need to know what people's basket spend demographics and more information on that as well. So that's probably something we'll look at as part of our Invest Swansea project, again in partnership with that. And safe and clean will remain a focus for us for this bid year, certainly, because with our focus groups and meeting with our stakeholders, that's a priority at the moment, in order to make it safe and clean and a more inviting environment, which I feel is working. I do feel we're on the cusp of some very, very exciting times in the city centre. And again, as businesses, as 800 odd businesses, the investments of the local authority then has been the catalyst for this investment which we're seeing from the private sector and the interest going forward.
Thank you, Russell. I've got questions from Mike White, Will Thomas, and Mary Jones at the moment, and Jeff as well. So start off with Mike White.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to refer to page 36, Chair. 1.4 regarding the East Stover, the former VHS. Are we able to advise, Phil? We've got a list of the people and organisations that are already sort of there already. Are you able to advise if you've got any other agencies or departments that will be going into this building as well?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor White. Look, one of the, I think, good challenges for Astorva is the fact that we are all fast running out of space in terms of interest in the building. You'll know that the archives are due to move there to a state-of-the-art facility on the 4th floor. You've got the new library as well as the children's library going in there. You've then got a number of front-facing council services, the sector services and partner services going in there. That list has been recently updated. So I think we could probably build, if we were building it from scratch, we could probably build one even bigger than we've currently got. But it is a substantial footprint, as you know, that not just takes into the old British Home Stores building, but also Miss Selfridge and the buildings around it. Cabinet toured it last week to see progress. A huge atrium has been cut out to the middle of the building now, allowing natural light to flood in through the 4 floors of the building there. Some significant works are going on to reconfigure it, and I'm sure it'll be a truly fantastic facility. I'm hoping to be able to release some imagery around what it will look like for the public to use in due course. So yes, we're getting lots of interest, Councillor White, and in fact, I think that what it's demonstrating is there is demand for our city centre. We're getting that, as Russell has said, from private sector as well. If you will allow me just to add to that, Chair, recently visited Palace Theatre and Albert Hall. Both are getting, again, very strong interest. And I know the new owners of the Albert Hall have been announcing some of their new tenants. I was pleased to be with Tramshed Tech, who will be our new tenants in the Palace Theatre. And they were telling me about the fact that medtech companies, fintech companies will be part of the mix in the new Palace Theatre, bringing companies that are currently based in London and elsewhere into the city centre as part of their, us replacing jobs in the city centre. Because the reality, and I do say this to as many times as I can, because people do need to remember, if you want a major national store or a business to be basing itself in the city centre, you've got to demonstrate the footfall and the trade that's around it, and that comes from people living, working and visiting the city centre. So the retail is always a benefactor of what you do. And I think, as Mr. Smith said earlier and others, it's not about shiny new buildings in the city centre. Nice as it is to have redevelopment and regeneration, it's what will go on in those buildings that is the really important part. And the figures here around retail are telling a very strong story. Again, we are seeing significant investment from the private sector. Cathays have bought a number of large buildings in the city centre and are currently being repurposed and refurbished. The biophilic building is coming to completion. Our 71, 72 is coming to completion. I mentioned the Albert Hall and Palace Theatre. Those aren't online yet. Those haven't yet contributed to the welfare of the city centre. So again, it's about getting all of that viability in there, which will help then make the case more easily for people to invest. And I'm confident that in the next few months, we will see some major announcements of major chains basing themselves in Swansea City Centre.
Thank you, Neil. Look forward to that. I must say, Palace Theatre, when I went round, it's looking really, really impressive. We had a tour as a committee, and it was absolutely brilliant. Do we have a date, a projected opening date for Astorva yet?
Astorva will be spring of 2025.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Mike, are you okay? Any follow-ups, Mike? No?
No, thank you. That's fine, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mike. Will Thomas?
Thanks, Chair. I got a number of questions, so I don't know how's best to answer them. I'll maybe ask them all, and hopefully people can remember to feed through them. Firstly, I think it's worth commending. There's obviously a lot of great work being done. So well done to Phil and his team and the cabinet and Swansea Bid, because obviously I think it is a big job, but it's definitely seen improvement in the city centre. So well done everyone on that. I think the best bit about Swansea City Centre is obviously the market. It's the thing that brings the character to the city, especially with lots of high streets looking the same, with lots of brands in the same cities as we have. I do feel personally that the entrance off Oxford Street and the other side, I can't remember the name of that road, but the entrance to the market could be a little bit more impressive and a little bit more open, and maybe some automatic doors, things like that, just so that it's a bit more inviting. 72 Kingsway, I have mentioned this a number of times, brought it up a few times with the link with Picton Arcade. So I'm just wondering, is that actually happening? Because obviously, if I was one of the businesses in Picton, I'd be worried that the people are going to cut through the other way. So obviously their footfall might diminish quite a lot there. So I'm just wondering how that link's going. We were in a work group the other day with the Swansea Bay Strategy City Centre meeting with the PDC, and when we were looking at the map of Swansea City Centre, I think that the owner of Park Towie's done a very good job at redeveloping that, and I think that's thriving. But that link between sort of Park Towie and Castle Gardens could be improved dramatically. I don't think that really flows. I wonder if there's any plans to improve that. For example, Castle Cinema, I understand that there's a planning application coming forward there, but wouldn't that make a great hotel or something, or wouldn't it help to link the two parts of the city? The other thing which was mentioned was the Dragon Hotel, the facade, which is, I think that's great news as well. That'll make it look nice. I'm just wondering if there was any plans to finish off Alexandra House as well, because obviously sort of half of that's clad, which looks fantastic, and the other half's a bit old. So happy to ask those questions again if it helps, but that's all I've got. Thank you.
Robert, and then possibly Phil.
I'd like to thank Will Thomas for congratulating us, actually, but look, there's no part of the city centre that isn't not being touched, and I think that's through the vision of the leader. It's been great in my position as a cabinet member, having a leader that has got the vision and driving us forward. And I've never seen that in my 41 years on the council before. When we look at, you mentioned the first one was the market. Work has already been done, as you know, in the centre of the market. Work went on there where we had a food court, bringing events and activity into the market. As was mentioned by Phil earlier on about the occupancy of the market, I think it's only 6 stalls that are not let at the moment. Is it 93% occupancy? But 3 of those are still under, at this moment, under offer. And so that will be going back up, and the work being carried out by the manager there, and to be awarded the best indoor market in Britain again for the 3rd time is fantastic, and congratulate the city centre manager's work there. But we are aware that it needs to be more attractive, and that we are out to consultation, or we will be shortly, on the entrances of Union Street, White Walls and Oxford Street, to make sure that they are fit for purpose and attractive, to make sure we bring people in. 71 and 72 Oxford Street is being envisaged. An agreement should be reached soon to be able to cut through from Picton Yard at the back into Picton Arcade. It brings that natural flow that is needed. On Park Tower, planning permission has been granted for the old castle buildings there, and again a natural walkway from Park Tower into the city centre it will be worked out on that. The Dragon Hotel, we look forward to seeing a green wall put onto the front of that. That has been agreed, and the finance agreed to make that happen. And I think that will bring a completely different look. Anybody looking at the green wall on the other end of the Kingsway, I think people can see how green now our city centre is beginning to look. And there's not many cities have this green look like we have in Swansea. You mentioned Alexander House. I haven't got an update on Alexander House. I don't know, Paul, whether you've got anything there.
Yeah, we have been attempting to work with the owner and negotiating with the Welsh Government to try to get some support for it. Not successful yet, but it's probably timely to reopen those discussions. So we'll take another look at that with Welsh Government.
Thank you, Paul. So I think you see there, Will, I think everything that you've asked is being delivered. And it is important that we do get, as the leader said, more people working and living in the city centre and linking everything up. I was really pleased to see the Estates Gazette saying that Swansea is one of the top 3 cities in the UK in which to invest. You know, we are back in the trend in that way, and I think that is because of the investment going right across the city centre, not in just one section of it. So whether you know it is the Palace, whether it is down at the Quadrant, whether it is the work we're doing with Urban Splash, where we will be looking at how you come in from High Street Station right the way down the Forest and Moor, the route to the sea, linking up right at where the Civic Centre is. I think it is looking really good. I was at the Reef conference with the leader earlier in the year, and the amount of interest being shown by investors in Swansea is absolutely terrific. And we are not sitting back. We are being proactive and going out and looking at how to bring investment in the city. But the leader did say that when we started on this route, and I think a lot of people had doubts of, no, here we are, the city of artist impression. Well, nobody says that anymore. Why don't they say it anymore? Because they're not artist impressions anymore. They're actually being delivered or in construction. So, you know, I never thought that we would see all this happening so quickly in one major program. But that is because of the drive being shown. We said that the private sector would follow, and the private sector, people like Peter Loosemore, that has been investing heavily, and to congratulate him, Ian Morgan, and with his company Carte in the city centre, the confidence that they are shown with the Princess House, Princess Quarter in Oxford Street, in the Inquiry in the McDonald's building, the work that will be carried out on Castle Square. The only complaints perhaps we get is, you know, sometimes it looks like a construction site, but, you know, you've got to be able to get all this work done. We're trying to get it done as quickly as possible. The footfall will follow. The people working there will make sure that that footfall happens, bringing that renewed confidence, and then bringing in new businesses into the city centre. I think Swansea is well positioned to take advantage for the future. And a lot more cities, I think, will be looking to see what Swansea is doing.
Thank you, Robert. I think it's Mowbray you're not picked in yours now, isn't it? Yeah. Okay. Will anything follow up at all?
No, thank you.
Okay. Mary.
Thank you. I'm also going to thank you, but only for the market, so don't get excited. No, I think it's really, really good. I'm in there quite often, and it's whatever day of the week, whether it's weekend or weekday now, there are people, you know, in there and spending. So I think, yes, congratulations on the market. I'm going to point out some errors as well. Page 40, I've got my right page. I didn't know we were in America, so it's city centre is a typo. And after it says the city centre and the Quadrant WIST response. What is WIST response? Is it a typo or is it some card game, or I'm not quite sure what it's meant to read. And when you go on to the living wall, I think there's an H missing on the first line. It says Dragon Hotel planning has now been approved. It should be has. So can we have them amended? Because these are documents that we use.
I think it's whilst.
Whilst I'm trying to read it and work out the word, see what I mean? But and city centres, that's the only one I could find that's spelt the wrong way. Going on to the actual report, Debenhams, yes, that was a blow to the city centre, and I'm glad to hear that there are talks and things happening. The Dragon Hotel Green Living Wall, very good idea, as was the Hayes building, I think it's called, biophilic. But I did make a comment in planning about that. I'm not so worried about the Dragon Hotel because it's going to be a living wall on a structure which I'm assuming the management of the Dragon Hotel will have responsibility for. When I asked the question about the Hayes building, I was told it was the residents that were going to have responsibility because they're going to have growing areas as well and different things. So I'm still concerned that it'll be nice when it's first set up, but going forward, is it just going to end up as green sludge? I think we need to be very, very careful that we are putting things in place to make sure these living walls are maintained in perpetuity. And also another question, now they've taken the hoardings down on 71, 72 the Kingsway, and it looks nice and open. When you go round onto Oxford Street, the hoarding is still up outside. I call it Woolworths, it's, I don't pound land or whatever it was. And it looks awful behind. You can see the building, the Hayes, and it looks really attractive. And you get onto Oxford Street, and you've still got the frontage of the old store. The old store. When are they likely to either upgrade it or take it away? Because it is detracting now from what is going on in that sort of square. Thank you.
Who wants that? Leader?
Just on the general thing around scaffolding and hoardings, a couple of things that we but on that general position of when you're doing works, you've got to make the area look as good as possible whilst you're undertaking the works. That's the principle, isn't it? So again, go back and speak to Haser about the specific area you're talking about. Obviously, the frontage, if you're talking about the Woolworths store coming out onto Oxford Street, then that hoarding, I think, has already had designs and other things attached to it. So I'm not sure which bit of it you're talking about because it does have a facade on it. Are you talking about ones that are further round? More than happy to go back to the developer and the construction partner and look at that.
Can I clarify what I mean? The actual building itself, they've got hoarding and then they've got a double set of gates which you can see through. But if you look at it, it's still the old metal windows. So there's nothing. I want to know when it's coming down or whether they're going to upgrade it because the building seems to be behind it, not joined onto it.
So sorry, I thought you were making a comment about the hoardings. Okay, so but the building that will be done as part of the facade works of the building as it's done. So my understanding is retail space at the bottom, office accommodation above, and then living accommodation above that. In terms of the scheme, my understanding is that there are living walls to be attached to the structure, but they're not going to be living walls that the residents themselves will maintain. However, the residents will have the opportunity of living plants, etc., in their balconies on the building itself. So my understanding is that the living walls are part of the overall management agreement of the building. And some of them will be almost internal, external, because there's a cut through which will take you through part of the old Woolworths store into Mowbray Yard, as it will be called, which will have a living wall attached to the side of the building there.
Thank you, Leader. Just take a stroll down and have a look at what I meant.
Well, we did actually go through there last week and had a look. In fact, we went up from the ground floor up to the 13 floors. There's going to be over 50 odd units in there, which Pobble will control and manage. But as a biophilic building, this is work being carried out between the university working with Pobble and with Haser. It's probably the first in the country of this type. So there's a lot behind the scenes that you haven't seen yet, but it'll be a fantastic building and the first in the United Kingdom.
And on the subject of scaffolding, of course, Princess Way, it's massive improvement now.
It's down.
God.
No, and let's be fair, you know, it's a private building.
Yeah.
The leader has probably nagged. Started off with meetings with the company that owned it, who promised it'll be down next month. It became a legal position between the owners and the building company. And so therefore that's what drew it out. We were not happy with it. The tenants in there were not happy with it. Now it's been resolved. I think it's moving on to new hands, and I think that'll be good for Swansea.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Jeff?
Yeah, a few points actually. Phil actually mentioned about footfall, you know, with cameras round. I'm intrigued with that, how it measures accurately the number of people, whether they can by train, bus, car, walking, and so on. So, but it's just a comment there. I don't know how accurate it is at the end of the day. And I must admit, I don't often agree with the leader, but I agree with what he actually said. You know, with regards to, you know, shiny buildings and so on. It's fine, you know, actually building shiny buildings, just getting people to actually work there at the end of the day. And again, what Russell actually said with regards to spend, you know, the more jobs we've actually got, and I've been always down this line anyway, the better pay jobs, the more people have got to spend, and the shops are better off, and the city is better off. So hopefully, you haven't actually said with regards to who's going into 71, 72 the Kingsway, and hopefully we'll have some news on that soon. Not at the moment, though. No.
If you're asking who the tenants are,
yes,
we can't announce those until the formal legals are signed. But over half the building has direct interest, which I believe the lawyers and the teams and the agents are working on at the moment. The palace already is let to Tramshed Tech.
Yeah, I've been up there.
So again, I think the reality is wherever we are seeing construction, I think one of the ones you can use from the private sector as well is Ian Morgan and Cathays. They took over Princess House. When they took that over, I believe the occupancy rate was 40%. It's now 100% let. And that shows that the challenge we had as a city centre was that we weren't offering the right quality of office space. We've started to address that. But also, if you had a company, therefore, that wanted to expand and grow, they had nowhere to go in the city centre. They were forced to actually leave and relocate elsewhere. That is, again, through the city deal and through these strategies we've got, trying to address that. So I've never taken the view that, you know, we should be shying away from delivering what we feel we need as a city. We aren't London. We aren't like some of the cities in England where they oversupplied office space. We were starting from a position where we had little or no supply. So the demand is definitely there, and that's been proven with what we've seen in terms of the lettings that have taken place. But I know people want to know who the tenants are as soon as possible. I'm frustrated because I would love to come and tell you not only who the tenants are for Earth, but for Debenhams and lots of other places. I can't until the financials and the legals are sorted. But I guarantee you there will be announcements very soon.
Okay, thanks for that. It was also good to read that 350,000 people have actually used the arena. I think that equates to about just over 3,000 a week. Have we got any? I know you actually said that it perhaps attracts investment, you know, in other parts of the city. But do those people actually just come to the arena and then disappear straight away, or have we got any information with regards to do they spend money in the city then? I don't know if Russell can comment on that.
The answer is yes on that. I'll see to others in a second. The economic impact from the arena development itself is £17.1 million per year. That's the stated figure within the city deal documents, and that's the number that underpins the business plan for the arena. So the arena has outperformed its business plan over its 3-year projection, and we're ahead of where we thought we'd be. I think Richard Yule with Wales Online and that had worked through some of the figures, and he'd made a statement that I think we were getting something close to 1.5 million as a council back from the investment we've made. So yes, the arena is performing really well. It was supposed to, remember, have around 200 or 175 events a year, I think it was, plus other visits and other usage. We are seeing strong demand for the arena, which is supporting the city centre. It has then secondary consequences in terms of increase in parking rates, increase in taxi taken, increase in hotel rooms. Councillor Francis Davis has said previously, when speaking to the Collier's report, we're now told that we would need around 3.5 extra hotels for the city, and we've recently made public announcements around the delivery of a new hotel next to the arena, because that was always part of that Copper Bay scheme, which is the hotel itself supports the arena business as part of that conferencing offer. So, you go to speak to people like Morgan's, you go to speak to other hotel operators, they will tell you that their occupancy rates are doing really well.
Yes, my last point really was a hotel next to the arena. Are we any nearer as such to getting the finance for it? That was the sticking point, wasn't it?
No, the finance wasn't a sticky point. We've got a deal which we were able to share with potential bidders in terms of support that they would get as part of a package to deliver a hotel. The procurement has been rerun. The issue was that the company that we'd chosen, we had concerns around the operational arrangements within that body itself. So we felt important that we reran that procurement to give ourselves a partner that we had confidence to go forward with. We now have that, and the next phase then will be providing you with the details around who the brand will be and what the final designs for that hotel will be. But the finances have changed since we did it the first time, which is a good indicator of the city centre, where we previously would have had to put some support in for that. Now people are providing support to us in order to secure the ability to run that hotel.
Okay. Russell, do you want to add something?
Yes, thank you. Just to pick up on Rob is saying there, the arena, if you look at it, is the new anchor tenant, if you want to call it that, for us as businesses. We've had nothing but positive feedback from our businesses, especially in the marina area, which is in our bid area as well. And also through our independent retail forum, our hoteliers forum, international retailers forum, we've put the arena in contact with them. So they're doing different packages. So they'll go and eat somewhere, then go. They'll go and drink somewhere, then go. So we are working together in order to keep the money local as well. So, and also the arena, we definitely need more hotels because we're booking up literally from Bridgend, even from Cardiff down sometimes, down to Pembrokeshire, those hotels which we have available for the graduations, which is a really good economy for us as students, as any other demographic is. So we desperately need more hotels for that. But the arena has made a big difference in answer to your question, Councillor. It's made a big difference to our economy as businesses, and we welcome that investment as well.
Mary, do you want to follow up on that? Because I've got another question.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'm thinking about Oystermouth Road, and as we know, because we're of an older generation, there were always a lot of bed and breakfasts along there, and unfortunately we've lost them. And I've asked the question before, but quite a while ago. How is there any way that we can encourage them to stay as bed and breakfast? Because I've got a feeling there's a few along there now for sale. I'm trying to think now, because I've seen for sale notices. You will know we've given planning permission to one that was meant to be, I can't remember what it was for, children's home, was it? And then the next thing we found out, it was on an Airbnb. So we need to be very careful. But I think we need to encourage the bed and breakfast, not just on Oystermouth Road, if there are any in the vicinity, in the uplands, wherever, to carry on. And is there any package we can sort of help them with to to actually upgrade their premises so people will actually stay in them, because they can walk from there. It's such a convenient spot.
These grants used to be available from the Wales Tourist Board, didn't they, at one stage?
I just deal with the broader issue. I think one of the challenges that happened during COVID pandemic was obviously many of those B&Bs reverted to supporting people who were temporarily homeless and people who needed housing support. That has persisted since the pandemic. And it's not just placements from Swansea Council or people who are waiting to get into our housing supply, but also neighbouring councils are placing people within Swansea sometimes. So that is something that's very difficult to prevent, because obviously the councils will make their block bookings with the private owners of the B&Bs. From a tourism perspective, we absolutely would support investment in those facilities, and the return to proper B&Bs along the seafront is part of the Swansea offering. We hope that as the arena continues to progress with its bookings and shows, that people will see the opportunity to turn those B&Bs back into a proper tourism offering. That's what we would like. We're taking steps with Councillor Lewis and the housing teams to provide alternative temporary accommodation elsewhere in Swansea and in the city centre, so that it'll hopefully remove some of the pressures that are currently on the B&Bs.
I would like, and we don't know what's going to happen under the Shared Prosperity Fund. The Shared Prosperity Fund, one thing has been a success, the money coming from central government direct to local authorities. I know the 22 local authorities have found that very useful. It's speeded up the process. And I know that Paul Ralph's team have been handling all the Shared Prosperity Fund for all of West Wales. Ethan Talbot, Swansea, Carmarthen, Pembroke, and doing a great job. I think it's £158 million has gone through Paul's small department. But I would hope that in future, this is the sort of thing that grants could be available. We don't know what the future is on the Shared Prosperity Fund, whether there's going to be a Shared Prosperity Fund Mark II, who knows? But I think it's been very good the way we've handled it now. Whereas when the money goes direct to Welsh Government, there's a delay then between central government to Welsh Government and Welsh Government down to. I would hope that, the old subsidiarity of why we will look in for Welsh Government is making sure that the money can come direct to local authorities to get it spent quickly, and we are closer to the ground of what the needs are in our own particular cities and towns throughout Wales. But the Airbnb, and this is a year-old figure now, had increased by over 200% in Swansea. Lots of people now look for Airbnb. Unfortunately, they don't figure in tourist information that we gather, but we can't dismiss it. It is there and it exists, and there's a huge amount of people using it.
I understand at one stage the Welsh Government are considering licensing B&Bs, which would at least give us a handle on how many there are and the quality of the accommodation which is available, wouldn't it? So, yeah, okay. Right, Di Jenkins.
Thank you, thank you, Chair. Just what I'd like to say, thank you to the officers and the leader for all the plans coming to fruition now, especially with the palace and what's happening in the marketplace there, with the footfall that's going to come through and it's over. I think it's going to lead to Swansea being a weekend destination place for tourists, especially the arena as well. And what I'm really looking forward to is with the footflow is the improvements to that Castle Gardens. I'm probably a bit biased, since for 44 years I've been looking down on it from the tower block, and glad to see it going to be a lot greener and better facilities there for the kids and also the sporting fans there. Can I just ask, my question would be, what's the end date for it to come to fruition at Castle Gardens there, please?
Thank you, Councillor Jenkins. Yeah, I think, look, people do look back with fondness to the old Castle Gardens, even though the reality in its latter days was that it was a challenging area for the police to police properly, and it had the problems that lots of areas have today. So in going back to a green, colourful Castle Gardens, we've obviously had to take care with its design to make sure it's a safe space for people. There aren't any dark corners, etc. And, I think what we've got as an opportunity here now is to put a really green heart back into the core city centre. A 41% increase in green space there, new play fountains for kids, new space for people to sit and enjoy. There'll be a new upgraded TV screen in there as well for sporting events and other events for people to enjoy. A couple of commercial units in there, hopefully ones that perhaps showcase some of our best local brands. All of that opportunity is before us. Work will start in the next few weeks on Castle Garden, so there will be a period of disruption, and I think it's about 12 to 18 months, depending on the time frame for the works to be done. So again, within a relatively short period of time, we will have a fantastic new Castle Gardens back in the city centre. I know, again, I think that's one of the things that comes up a lot on social media is how people miss their Castle Gardens. Well, hopefully what they'll get is something that they can cherish for years to come.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
I think there was some rose-tinted spectacles in terms of what it used to be like here. Okay, any more questions at all? No, I was just reflecting actually the appropriateness of discussing the market in the Lillian Hopkins room, and she did a lot of work on that market, and it's worth reflecting on that. Okay, thank you very much for that. We move on to the next item. So next item is item agenda 10, which is the work plan, and the next meeting is on the 8th of October, and we're looking at 71-72 the Kingsway, as well as the capital. Sorry? Oh, it's still August, isn't it? God, yeah. I'm losing track of the year. Next meeting is the 10th of September. We're looking at the Q4 end of year monitoring report, the annual review of performance, and the audit Wales report on assets as well. So as part of that meeting, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Okay, and then the last item is the letters, which there's one there for information, which Chris sent to David Hopkins. So I think that's it. Thank you very much indeed for coming. It's been a very interesting meeting, and see you all next time. Cheers. Yeah, you might want to mention to Chris, you might want to put the placemaking plan